pray. For the beauty of this day, we thank Thee, Lord. For national leaders who have given faithfully and served well their people, we bless Thee, Lord. For the poor whose voices cry to us from the city barrios and the barren mountainsides of the world, we ask strength to serve Thee, Lord. For those who have said, Here am I, send me, to Hospicia, Puno, Blackpool, Chifwesi, Managua, Guanacaste, Americas, Freetown, and all over the world. We ask for strength and guidance, O Lord. For this chapel, for the words that are spoken here, for the challenge to serve that we find here. We pray for courage to meet Thy call. Amen. Please be seated.
We are gathered here today to welcome two honored guests into our community. Dr. Fernando Belaunde Terry, who will speak to us, and his wife, Violeta Correa de Belaunde, who will receive an honorary degree. It is really through their joint efforts that so many of our winter term and mission programs have attained true works of distinction in some of the most remote areas of Peru. And so before we really go any further, I'd like for you to meet some of your friends who are here. All the students who have worked in Peru in some years past or who plan on going this January. Would you please stand? For those of you who may not be aware, I would remind you that some of the students who stood and others who will be going to Peru this year have really made significant accomplishments. In the last 4 years, in the village of Esposa, the following things have been done. A rural electric system was installed. A building was erected for a national training institute to assist farmers and their spouses in agriculture, nutrition, and public health. A dormitory was constructed. A model irrigation system was put into place, and 10 medical programs have been conducted in the villages surrounding the area. In the village of Puno, houses have been built for Indian families, and next winter term, the group expects to build a community center as well as to expand the health clinic in Puno and Juliaca. This day is a terribly important day for us, and I hope it symbolizes to everyone here that while, of course, many miles separate Peru and Indiana and DePaul University, one of the things that does bind us together is our concern for the underdeveloped countries of our world and underdeveloped villages of our world. We appreciate Belaunde's visit with us. We look forward to the address, and now Dr. Meekum will formally introduce our speaker.
Our speaker today is an architect who opens roads where there were none before in order to build a stronger nation. Twice he has been elected president of Peru. The first time his motto was, "Shovels for a revolution without bullets." As he was about to complete his first term, the army deposed him, fearing the results of the next election. After the army's fall from power, his call for a new reconquest of Peru for the Peruvians brought his re-election. Just 8 weeks ago, he achieved a goal that had not been met in Peru in 40 years. That is, a legally elected civilian president was able to pass the high office to another legally elected civilian. Throughout Latin America, our speaker's name is synonymous with decency, dignity, honesty, and honor. He is Dr. Fernando Belaunde Terry, Mr. President.
Vice President, members of the faculty, students. The last ceremony I attended was in Congress in Peru, in the presence of 7 heads of the state, to turn over the government to my constitutional successor. Now, this is quite a different occasion, and it's very encouraging for us. I am coming here to see my wife take over in green dust. It is always very exciting for me to meet university students. I had very good experiences with the students. Right here in the audience, a couple, a Peruvian couple, Ingeniero Deusto, my former Minister of Fisheries, and Mrs. Deusto, my former student in architecture. They were married in school, you know that happens everywhere. Have come all the way from Washington with my very good friend Camincho Gonzalez, who is an international official in your capital. I am very pleased that they could share with me this beautiful moment in which we experience once again American hospitality. In my days as a student, that was 50 years ago, I had the opportunity to be in Florida at the University of Miami, and then later on, when my family moved to Mexico, I went to the University of Texas. So since my youth, I know very well about American hospitality. Now, in my exile, during my long years of exile after my first term, I was lucky enough to teach at several distinguished American universities and to receive invitations that made it possible for me to do in the States what I had known for having done in Peru. In Peru, they say that I know the whole country. One of my books has a title, Pueblo por Pueblo, Town by Town in Peru. I think I could perhaps attempt to do the same, town by town in the United States. Fortunately, I had the opportunity, and this was a great compensation in my exile years, to visit this great country, and Canada, and to have a very clear idea of the American habitat and environment. This is the greatest contrast, a geographic contrast, especially with the Andean area where I come from, where it is very difficult to find flat land as you have here. Flat land is found, as you know, in the Argentine pampas. Perhaps they are the great similarity with the United States, and in some of the Brazilian plains in the south. There is flat land in the Amazon forest, but it is not very accessible except by navigable rivers and a small system of roads. But this environment in Indiana shows the great difference between this area and the Andean area. The Andean area is more similar to California. The coastal desert in the Pacific, all the way from Ecuador to northern Chile, is very much like Arizona. So the great challenge there is the lack of water. You have too much of it here, but there we have to resort to practices of irrigation, not only by spray irrigation, but by this new technique, drop by drop, drip irrigation, which was developed partly in Arizona and partly in Israel. We are introducing that in the southern coast in Maquis, and also in flower cultivation in some areas of Peru. We have to be very careful about water in the coastal desert. There are few oases. One of them is that one in which Aspidia is located. But usually we have to go 20 miles, 25 miles to find a new oasis. And Peru has been described, especially the coast of Peru, as Egypt, as many little Egypts, not one Egypt along the line, the Nile, Great River, but rather a few minor Egypts along torrents coming down from the high mountains. There are other areas in Peru, like the Sierras, the highlands, where vegetation is found, where mineral wealth is very abundant. In fact, in our economy, we sell about $1.5 billion a year of minerals. And then on the other side of the Andes, we have the high forest and the low forest. What I mean by the conquest of Peru, or by Peruvians, or Peru's own conquest, is taking possession of new land, expanding the agricultural frontier. I know that a lot of work has been done in these fields here in Indiana, but in the Andean region, the geographic challenge is much more severe. Peru has been known as a country builder of land, because you either have to build terracing in the high Sierras with very deep valleys, or to irrigate arid land, or to penetrate into the jungle, which is the great effort we have been doing in the last 5 years, and we did in the 60s. I think the American experience is very valuable. Not only your atavic sense of pioneering. After all, your grandfathers and great-grandfathers built this country going from east to west. In Peru, we have to do exactly the contrary. We have to go from west to east and take possession not only of the low Amazon jungle, which is accessible by rivers, but rather of the high jungle, which has better ecological conditions, beautiful landscapes, and many resources, especially hydraulic resources for energy and petroleum. Furthermore, it is very adaptable to agriculture and cattle raising. So the great effort in my previous government and my first administration, during the 10 years in which I was responsible for the government, was to take possession of our own land, trying to build the forests
highway, what we call the marginal forest highway, which runs along the foothills of the Andes and eventually will connect through the foothills in the Andean amphitheater, because the Andes make a curve in South America, all the way from Venezuela in the Trujillo Mountains, going on to Colombia in the Llanos, and in Ecuador, the petroleum area of Lago Agrio, then along the Peruvian foothills, all the way to Bolivia in a beautiful place called Santa Cruz. This a curve that will run in an altitude from 1,000 feet to 3,000 feet. And as you know, in the tropics, altitude will compensate latitude. The low jungle is very hot. It has a lot of rain, very humid, while the high jungle has a certain amount of rain, not as much as in the Andes, but it is of convenient ecological conditions. We have built already 1,000 miles of that road, and not only along the road, but in navigable points we have reached with small craft. We are able to incorporate about 3,000 miles for agriculture. That is exactly the length of the Danube River in Europe. And as you know, the Danube is a very important factor in the economy of 7 European countries. So what we have done, the battle I believe we have won in the conquest of Peru by Peruvians, is the incorporation of new areas, the extension of the agricultural frontier, comparable to the areas of the Danube River. So we are very optimistic about the future. Now, the United States experienced this great incorporation of the West last century under very severe and difficult conditions. The picture today is completely different. We have made so many advances in the world, and I just want to point a few of them. In the time I've been active in politics in Peru, since I reached the presidency in '63, there was a great change in medicine, antibiotics. There was a great change in communication, television, a tremendous change in the space program. I remember one day in my first term, I received a group of American astronauts. They hadn't gone yet to the moon. Mr. Armstrong was there, and they had been in space. And they brought me a portrait of Peru. It was not the usual mosaic of air photographers, which you can always have, but it takes a lot of pictures to make that mosaic. It was a single shot in which we had Bolivia, then Lake Titicaca in the highlands, on one side Chile, on the other side Peru. They gave me this picture, and I immediately had a very clear vision of what this meant. I knew this was going to be a great step forward in geographic exploration, and I knew what was to come. A final system for mapping by remote sense. And while I was in exile in the United States, I was very much concerned with remote sense. Very soon in Washington, I'm going to go and see the new building, which is a very important piece of architecture. And since then, we ordered through the World Bank the mapping of Peru with the most recent system. All our mapping had been somewhat precarious. It was very good in the coastal area, in some of the mountain areas, in the Lake Titicaca area, but it was imprecise in the rest of Peru. Sometimes a river was discovered that was not in the map. Naturally, air maps are more concerned with mountains. So sometimes the river location was not accurate. Sometimes we discover rivers. For instance, the engineers building a road saw a river grow in the flow of water. So they thought somewhere there should be a tributary to that river. And they call it Rio Previsto, the foreseen river. And finally, they found that tributary. So that was the stage in which geography was, not only in Latin America, but in the Third World. Right now, in Peru, the last thing we did was to complete the Peruvian mapping with 80 maps that cover the whole country from the most recent satellite techniques. I think this is the most important public work. Naturally, what was called the virgin jungle is now well known because satellite mapping is especially accurate when it comes to water systems, river systems. This has made possible many important developments and projects. One of the great ideas in South America is to interconnect the river system. The Amazon actually has a natural and mysterious connection with the Orinoco River. Some of the Spanish conquistadors and later on some of the explorers, including some Americans and von Humboldt, went through that natural path in small craft. Well, I decided to send a Navy gunboat, which was built 50 years ago in London, of some dimension. It was 150 feet long, 24 feet wide, a draft of 4.5 feet. So I commissioned our Navy to go from a Peruvian port in the Amazon system, or Iquitos, all the way to the Orinoco in Venezuela, trying to cross the Casiquiare Pass. And then I flew to the Amazon basin. I didn't have time to make the whole trip. It took a long time to go and come back. But I flew to Rio Negro, tributary to the Amazon, San Carlos, boarded the boat there on Monday night, and landed Friday morning in the Orinoco. The ship went on very deep into Venezuela, till the rapids. So we proved that this pass actually is there. Naturally, for commercial navigation, it will have to be somewhat improved. Some investment will have to be done. But it will be a great step forward. On the other hand, in the southern part of the river system, the Amazon tributaries should connect with the River Plate system, with the Paraná-Paraguay system. Two American naval officials last century, Herndon and Gibbon, explored the area and went very deep into Brazil. They came through Buenos Aires during the Rosas regime, which was a dictatorship, rather reluctant to admit this free navigation of the rivers. Finally he agreed, and they went on as far as Paraguay and finally landed in Cuiabá in Brazil. From the other direction you could go up there the Madeira River and hit the rapids in Porto Verde, which is the only great obstacle. Along those rapids, an American enterprise built the famous Railway of the Dead, an epopee of the beginning of this century, which cost many lives, many suicides, many people got ruined. But today things are so different. Medical advancement is so great. It is now safe to go there. I was recently, when I visited Brasilia, I stopped in Porto Velho, and I saw that old station, which is a museum now, and they are building a new line to pass the rapids. There are projects, future projects, to interconnect by canals, either the Madeira or the Tapajós River with the River Plate. Two explorers, Romanian explorers, Mr. Georgescu, Constantine and Paul came with me, the trip I was mentioning, did a trip in a small craft all the way from Trinidad in the Caribbean to Buenos Aires. Naturally, they had to use a few pioneering trails to pass from one basin to the other. It was about 10,000 kilometers, and they had to use 7% of pioneering trails. Now the Georgescus who worked for Universidad Bolívar, the University of Bolívar in Caracas, are planning a larger enterprise. They want to go all the way to Quebec. And I am enthusiastic about this project. They could do it all the way from Buenos Aires to Trinidad, then you have to board the ship and come into the Mississippi Delta and come out all the way through the St. Lawrence Seaway in Quebec. But what they are planning to do now is to come into Miami, and then by inland waterways go all the way to New Orleans, and then from New Orleans to the Great Lakes, and finally to the Atlantic, the North Atlantic. This project is of immense importance. If we succeeded in connecting the rivers, great natural resources would be at the reach of these great industrial areas. The hemisphere would be invulnerable practically. It would have everything. And this is very important since the Soviet Union has so much territory and so many resources. Naturally, we are very much for peace. We do not want any possibility of any war that would be suicide for humanity. But the only one to maintain peace is to have a balance of power. And this is why I believe that the hemisphere should be ready to use all its resources potential. This could be done through this pioneering work in inland waterways in South America. Naturally, this involves investment, energy production, especially electrical plants, some sophisticated civil engineering, and this would mean inland waterways of about 6,000 miles in South America, added to 3,000, a little over 3,000 miles from New Orleans to Quebec in North America, a total waterway of 9,000 miles. Now, the gap in the Caribbean and the Gulf of Mexico is not difficult right now. The new system of cargo container, makes it very easy to transship from river barges to ocean-going vessels. This could be done in Puerto Ordaz in Venezuela, and in New Orleans, and perhaps in some southern Florida port. And it would mean a possibility for supplying North American industry, Canadian and American, with an immense source of raw materials. And on the other hand, we will be in a position to receive a lot of support from the industrial areas of the hemisphere. By the way, Brazil is being developed. They have a great industrial effort going on. And I am sure Brazil may be perhaps the United States of the future from an economic point of view. Our relations with the United States, especially as far as Peru is concerned, are very cordial. Your diplomatic missions in Peru are not only very friendly, as they should be naturally, but they are also quite efficient. The present American ambassador is a former scholar from Virginia University, Ambassador David Jordan. And all the agencies from the United States, especially the Agency for International Development, AID, are very active. But we have to increase this action. These agencies have to get much more support from the United States, including the Inter-American Development Bank, in which American participation is so important. And since your balance of trade is in a difficult position, the only way to improve it is to support with credit assistance the other nations that now are in a very weak position for importing foreign goods due to the crisis, the energy crisis and the economic crisis that we are all suffering. From a personal and institutional point of view, relations are very good. I believe that the World Bank should be supported to start new, larger programs, and especially to reduce the local counterpart, the local assignments, the local matching funds. In World Bank loans, usually the percentage financed by the institution is not large enough. If you offer a loan for development with a 60% participation of the World Bank and a 40% participation of matching funds, of local matching funds, a solution would be practically impossible. I know of many credits that have not been used because we didn't have enough resources, enough local resources. So in this moment of crisis, what I would suggest is to reduce the local assignment. Local funds in a percentage way should be reduced perhaps to 10 or 20%. Otherwise, credit facilities could not be used in an efficient and rapid way. Unfortunately, there are some very difficult problems. On the one hand, it was very unfortunate that the United States could not stop this attack by a British naval and aerial force in the case of the Falkland Islands conflict. I tried to do my best to be of help. I remember when this expedition left the islands in the United Kingdom, I could see the great menace, not only to the world peace, but to the unity of the hemisphere and Occidental nations by a conflict between two nations that have been traditionally friends. And Argentina is no doubt one of the most important Latin American countries. It is well advanced. It has defeated illiteracy. It looks like a European country. And it has immense resources. They have been They had all controversies with the United Kingdom, but they were on diplomatic terms. Hostilities have been very unfortunate. As soon as the expeditionary force left from Britain, I was so much concerned that I was demanding from Peru a truce. I didn't want a controversy between those two friendly nations. And finally, the State Department here knew of my concern. The Secretary of State, General Hay, had tried to make an arrangement, but it was not successful. So he felt somewhat disappointed and distressed and perhaps alarmed. As soon as he heard of my concern, he gave me a phone call and encouraged me to go on to make a contact with the Argentine government. It was a military government. And for several days we were in constant contact. And finally we were on the verge of reaching an agreement, a peace agreement, when the Belgrano, the battleship Belgrano, was sunk. And that was a tragedy. 386 young Argentinians died. 700 were saved miraculously, because it was in very cold waters, and that was outside the 200-mile limit. So we were quite disappointed. I talked both to former President García in Argentina and to General Hay. And we had completed the draft of an agreement between the two countries when this bad news occurred. In spite of this failure, very soon when the Sheffield was lost, a very important British warship, and they had both lost a naval unit, the Argentines and the British. We again attempted a solution, and I have so many documents on that perhaps one day I will make them public. We were practically reaching an agreement, a peaceful agreement that was convenient for the two nations and that would have prevented this very unfortunate and tragic encounter. I believe this is the darkest page of our foreign affairs in the last 5 years. I do not want to criticize the United States, but I think that perhaps more could have been done to prevent this very sad encounter between Argentina and the United Kingdom. Another great problem has been the appearance of terrorist groups, which evidently are encouraged from abroad, and they have some connection with narco trafficking. In fact, in my first term in the 60s, and that was during the Kennedy and Johnson times, we had a movement of guerrillas that were evidently promoted by Cuba. Very soon we took control of the situation. It was also very sad to have this problem in a country that was very much involved in its own development. But in this second term, they have learned the lesson. So another technique is used. It is not a guerrilla war, as some people say. It's just terrorism. It's just killing people and blowing up, especially electrical systems. They know that rural electrification is the greatest hope of our agricultural people. So they always try to bomb pipes, electrical pipes. We have frequent blackouts in Peru. After I left office, The worst blackout affected Lima for about 3 days and several cities. We have now a centralized system of distribution, the Mantaro project, the large hydroelectric plant. And they are always get a target there to attack and create alarm in the nation. And unfortunately, this has continued after the end of my term, July 28th of this year. Besides this very unfortunate situation, which is aimed at the United States, what they want is to create the beachhead for a future confrontation. They know very well that in the first war, all Latin America was tied together with the Allies. Now, in that war, we were far away from the theater of hostilities, the European hostilities. Now, in the Second War, again, we were all tied together. There were a few exceptions. Argentina was the last one to join, but they did not declare war on the Axis. Most of the other countries symbolically declared war on the Axis. But the war was won in part because this hemisphere was completely safe. Panama was absolutely untouched. I wonder what would happen in a future continent in which perhaps the continent would not be along the same lines. If they could establish a beachhead in South America, it would be very bad. This is why I believe the terrorist movement is a matter of international politics, much more than a matter of an internal police situation. It has meant for us the loss of nearly 3,000 people, civilians, authorities, especially local authorities, mayors of small villages. We have lost about 200 people from the armed forces and the police especially. And on the other side, the terrorists have lost a little more, perhaps 40% government and 60% terrorists. I would say from nearly 3,500, or perhaps 4,000. A total of 6,000 people. In a war that is not our. We do not deny that there are problems, that there are social, economic problems, but not only in the Ayacucho area. You find them in many other areas in Peru and South America. This has an international motivation, and we have to understand it so that measures could be taken. On the one hand, to improve conditions there. On the other hand, to be very well aware of defense methods in any future emergency. In the few days to come, tomorrow and Friday morning, we will have, my wife and I, an opportunity to be with you in different groups, perhaps with the Spanish group, the Spanish-speaking group. And we will have plenty of time to develop some of these ideas. Today, I cannot abuse extending this talk too much, but I just want to say that we feel it is a great honor to be invited to this university. It is my first act after the end of my second term, and I am glad it is in an American town. I'm glad it is in an American university, because I owe very much to American universities. My own education and a great unforgettable hospitality during my days as an exile. Right now, it's a very different question. I can live freely in my country, I can go from town to town, fortunately enjoying a very friendly attitude from my fellow countrymen, who I believe appreciate what we try to do in the last few years and before. And perhaps what you have done is very expressive of the American attitude, the public opinion attitude in the United States, to do your part in this great crusade for development, for raising the quality of life of the peoples of this hemisphere and the world. Let me tell you that I wish you all very good luck in your future professional activities. And I want to say once again to the President and members of the board and the faculty on my profound gratitude and my wife's profound gratitude for this very kind invitation to Green Castle and to a university that we know is very well considered not only in this country but all over the world for your interest in Latin America, for your special interest in Peru. My wife and I have traveled all the way to Green Castle to say thank you.
this person has been approved by the faculty to receive an honorary degree from DePaul University. I therefore ask you, Mr. Gales, as Chairman of the Board of Trustees, to authorize me to bestow upon her this degree.
Dr. Bottoms, the Board of Trustees of DePaul University, by their unanimous vote, now authorizes you to confer an honorary degree on the candidate.
Dr. Bottoms, may I present Violeta Correa de Belaunde for the degree of Doctor of Humanities.
Violeta Correa de Belaunde, a friend of the disadvantaged people of your country, you have given strong support to DePaul University's interterm admission projects in Puno and Esquipio, opening doors to make the students' work significantly more effective. You have been active in community affairs and a representative of Latin America to the Global Advisory Board for the International Exposition of Economic Development in New York in 1984, and you have also served as co-director of Ofrecido, the National Development Project. You have ministered to your people in many other capacities as well, most recently sharing responsibility with your husband, the immediate past president of Peru, as together you saw your nation through an unsettled period in its history. In recognition of your continuing concern for the urgent needs of humanity, we bestow upon you this honorary degree. Upon the recommendation of the faculty, the Board of Trustees has authorized me to confer upon you Violeta Correa de Belaunde, the honorary degree of Doctor of Humanities. As a symbol thereof, I invest you with this hood and hand you this diploma bearing the great seal of the corporation and the signatures of the proper officials. Thank you.
President of the Board, Mr. Vice President, faculty members, students. To receive an honorary degree from such a prestigious American university represents a very special honor. However, in my case, coming from an institution that has shown so much interest in Peru, this honor has particular significance. Injustice, it is the DePaul University that really deserves a distinction from Latin America. I was witness of the deep sensibility with which you became involved in my country's social problems. Your participation in Aspitia's communal action, a village in the coastal desert, as in other regions, was characterized by your vocation for service and understanding of human people problems, where population growth magnified the education and health needs, two topics of your special interest. Peru is a laboratory of extraordinary human experience. Its dramatic geography proves a constant challenge, as Toynbee pointed out. It offers appropriate and fascinating topics for university research. Contact with communities has shown me their high human quality. Their main characteristic is what my husband calls the poor people's philanthropy. It consists of volunteering for common welfare work. These people's only requirements are technical aid and equipment, which they cannot always be with their own hands. Not only is an intermediate economy practiced there, It also equals Schumacher label as intermediate technology. They are blessed by a deep creative ability and are most receptive to any gesture of friendly cooperation. If this reaction has not occurred, the mission which I committed myself to fulfill would have required many millions far from our reach. Thanks to the people and at a very low cost, it has been possible to accomplish social work of modest conception, but considerable magnitude and results. This act of high academic significance constitutes a powerful incentive to persevere fostering community development. If there existed only one reason to justify the degree so generously conferred on me, it would be the opportunity to say, thank you for your devotion to mankind and its interest in Peru.
Before we stand for the singing of the last hymn, I would remind all the students and our guests and faculty that the Belaundes have graciously offered to stay downstairs for a few moments. We have punch if you're able to stay and would like to speak with them personally. Let's stand as we sing.